9 years ago, I disappeared. Not in the literal sense. My body was still breathing, still walking this earth. But to my family, I no longer existed. They didn't send search parties. They didn't ask questions. They didn't even speak my name. It started with a whisper, a lie wrapped in good manners. One check went missing from the family trust, then another. And somehow, fingers pointed at me. Claudia, my stepmother, always had a talent for saying cruel things in velvet tones. "She's troubled," she told my father. "Maybe she needs help or distance." And my father, Victor Hart, a man who ruled our family with silence and signatures, didn't even look me in the eye when he signed the paperwork that removed me from the business accounts. No trial, no truth, just erasure. I tried explaining. Once. He said, "Let's not make this harder than it has to be." So I left, packed one suitcase and walked out of the house I'd grown up in, the one with creaky floorboards and a third-floor window that still had my initials carved into the frame. No one followed, not for a week, not for a month, not for 9 years. I rebuilt my life in the shadows, never fully whole, but never broken, enough to forget. They didn't know where I went. I kept it that way. Until a letter arrived last winter. It was old, yellowed, and hand-signed by a man I hadn't heard from in decades. Samuel Monroe, my grandfather's lawyer. Inside was a sentence that changed everything. Your grandfather never removed you. In fact, he left you the deed. And just like that, I wasn't the forgotten one anymore. I was the owner. It came on a Tuesday. No return address. Just my name, Evelyn Hart, written in old-fashioned cursive, like a letter sent from another life. For a moment, I thought it was a prank. Or worse, a trap. But something told me to open it. Inside was a single page. Cream stock. Heavy texture. The signature at the bottom sent a shiver down my spine. Samuel Monroe. My grandfather's former attorney. The last man I remembered treating me like a person instead of a problem. I hadn't heard that name since I was 19. The letter read, "Miss Hart, I apologize for the lateness of this delivery. Your grandfather left instructions that this document only be shared in the event of legal challenge, or after 9 full years of your absence. Attached is a certified copy of the deed to the Hart estate. You are its sole beneficiary. This deed supersedes all prior claims or transfers." I read it 3 times. My fingers went numb. The Hart estate. The same property they'd accused me of stealing from. The house they'd banished me from. Mine. There was no if in the letter. No ambiguity. Just legal certainty, backed by seals and signatures. I called the number at the bottom. Monroe's voice was raspy but steady. "I kept my word to your grandfather. He wanted you protected." Protected? No one had protected me in 9 years. But suddenly, I had leverage. Not just a legal document. The deed. The one thing none of them could ignore. Not Victor. Not Claudia. Not the family that rewrote history without me. I stared at the envelope. They thought they erased me, but I was holding the ink. I didn't warn them. No emails. No phone calls. No polite RSVP to their annual winter soiree at the estate, the same event I once helped plan, down to the place settings and centerpieces. This year I wasn't invited, but I was coming anyway. I took the early flight, no luggage, but a folder of legal documents and a coat the same color as the January sky. Slate gray, clean, unreadable. When I arrived at the gates, the security guard didn't recognize me. I didn't blame him. 9 years and 3 cities later, even I barely recognized myself. "I'm Evelyn Hart," I said. He blinked. "Ma'am, the guest list is irrelevant," I replied, and handed him the deed. It only took a glance. His posture changed. He pressed the button. The gate creaked open. As I walked up the winding driveway, snow cracked under my boots like glass, breaking. Lights twinkled inside the mansion, crystal chandeliers, champagne flutes, silk dresses. It looked just like it used to, except this time I was the surprise. I slipped through the side entrance. No one noticed me at first. I stood near the fireplace. just beyond the flicker of recognition, until a champagne glass hit the marble floor. Tessa, my cousin, the only one who ever had a conscience, was frozen. Pale. Her eyes widened as she whispered, "Evelyn?" A hush spread like fog. Heads turned, voices lowered, and then, from across the room, Claudia appeared, clutching pearls and putting on a smile too late. "Darling," she breathed. "We didn't know you were coming." I smiled. "I know." The room didn't breathe. My presence was a splinter under their skin. Small, but sharp enough to ruin the whole evening. Victor Hart stood at the bar, whiskey in hand, frozen mid-pour. He met my gaze with that same look he wore 9 years. Ego. Not anger, not guilt, just calculation. As if I were a variable he failed to account for. Claudia crossed the room with practiced grace, her heels clicking like metronome taps of tension. She stopped just short of me, eyes wide and glossy with pretend warmth. "My God, Evelyn. You look so well," she purred, voice dipped in sugar and spite. "How unexpected." I didn't respond. Instead, I reached into my coat pocket and pulled out the folder. Thick, cream paper, official stamps, gold seal. I placed it on the antique piano with the kind of quiet finality that echoes louder than shouting. "This," I said, "is the deed to this estate. It bears my name, and my grandfather's. Signature, dated, certified, unaltered." Claudia blinked. Victor stepped forward slowly. He took the folder, flipped through it, and paled. He looked at Monroe's signature, the notary, the attached letter of instruction. Silence spread like spilled ink. A guest coughed. Someone clicked their phone camera. Another whispered, "Is this real?" Tessa hovered behind me, trembling. Claudia recovered first. "Darling, this can't be legal. There must be some misunderstanding." "No misunderstanding," I cut in, calm and razor sharp. "You live here because I allow it. Starting tonight, that changes." Victor's voice finally emerged, gravelly and low. "Why are you doing this?" I met his stare. "You taught me to survive silence, Father. Now I'm teaching you what it sounds like when I speak." They didn't scream. They strategized. The moment I left the room, Claudia's voice turned to whispers. She clutched the deed like it was radioactive, eyes darting for allies. Within minutes, the family lawyer, Mr. Daniel Cross, was on speakerphone in the study. "She forged it," Claudia hissed. "She must have found one of Monroe's old documents and doctored the rest." Victor didn't speak. He just nodded, lips thin, rage tucked neatly beneath the surface. From the hallway, I heard every word. I stepped into the doorway like a ghost that refused to fade. "Still accusing me of forgery?" I said quietly. "You did that 9 years ago. Want to try something new?" Cross's voice crackled through the speaker. "Miss Hart, unless you can produce the original, this deed won't hold." I placed a second folder on the desk. Samuel Monroe had the foresight to keep 2 originals, one in a fireproof safe, the other delivered to me by hand. Their faces dropped. Tessa, who had followed me in, broke the silence. "It's real. I've seen the seals. This isn't a stunt." Claudia's mask slipped. "You think this makes you powerful? This estate is our home. We built it." I didn't flinch. "You built facades," I replied. "Grandfather built legacy." He knew the difference. That's when they switched tactics. Claudia reached for me, placing a hand on mine like we were sisters again. "We've all changed. Evelyn, we've matured. Let's talk this out." I pulled my hand away. "If you wanted to talk, you would have answered the first letter, or the 10th. Victor rose to his full height. "You're making a mistake." I met his gaze. Calm. "Certain. I made one. Once, I walked away. This time I came with the deed." The storm outside had quieted to a hush, but inside me, something was still howling. After the confrontation, I slipped away from the estate and took a cab into town, to the cemetery, to Grandfather's grave. There was no one else around, just snow-dusted headstones and a silence thick enough to confess into. I knelt down, my breath hanging in the cold air like a secret. I kept quiet like you taught me. I stayed steady when they tried to shatter me. But now I need more than silence. In my coat pocket, I clutched the envelope Monroe had included, marked, "To be opened alone." Inside were three things. A handwritten letter from grandfather, dated just weeks before his death, a photograph of me as a child, sitting on his lap, both of us laughing under the backyard tree, and a key. The letter read, "They've changed, Evelyn. Or maybe they were always like this and I just refused to see it. But you always listened. You saw people, even when they ignored you. Claudia has been rewriting the narrative. She's convinced your father I was losing my mind, that you manipulated me. But this key opens the safe in my office. What's inside proves who tried to erase you. I returned to the estate before dawn. Everyone was asleep, or pretending to be. I unlocked the safe in the library. Inside, bank. Statements with missing funds. A forged letter trying to remove me from the will, signed in Claudia's handwriting, but notarized using a now disbarred family friend. And audio tapes, recordings of her coaching staff on how to phase Evelyn out quietly. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just stacked the papers, rewound the tapes, and walked upstairs. It wasn't just about reclaiming what was mine anymore. It was about revealing what they tried to bury. The estate dinner began like a scene from a magazine. Crystal glasses, a string quartet, smiling guests sipping aged Cabernet beneath chandeliers Evelyn once polished as a child. Everyone who mattered was there, or thought they did. Family friends, business partners, legacy hangers-on, and at the center, Victor Hart stood to make his toast, silver cufflinks glinting under soft light. I waited until the wine had been poured, until the forks had stilled. Then I rose from my seat at the far end of the long oak table, the one they'd placed me at to keep me quiet. My voice, when it came, was not loud, but it didn't need to be. I'd like to say something. Chairs shifted, eyebrows lifted. Victor's jaw twitched. Claudia set her glass down without sipping. I walked slowly to the head of the table, my heels echoing on the hardwood like clock ticks before a detonation. I placed a small speaker in the center, pressed play. The voice that poured out was gravelly, familiar, dead. If they find this, Evelyn, it means they tried to erase you. Again. But I left this recording because the truth deserves daylight. You are the rightful heir to this home, not because of blood, but because of integrity. Gasps broke the silence. I held up a folder and began handing copies down the table, page after page of financial records, notarized statements, and that forged letter Claudia thought had vanished. You said I was unstable, that I stole from you, that I didn't belong, I said calmly. But the truth is, you were afraid of what I inherited. Not money, not land, but memory. Claudia stood, eyes flashing. This is a performance. No, I interrupted. That was your specialty. I turned to Victor. You knew, or you didn't want to know. Either way, you watched them exile your daughter because it was easier than facing what your wife really was. A phone camera clicked. Another guest whispered, "She owns the estate?" Someone else. "This will go viral." Victor's hand trembled. He sat down without a word. Claudia walked out. No pearls, no defense, just silence. I didn't smile. Not yet. But I felt something loosen in my chest, the first breath that didn't feel borrowed. They didn't stop me on the way out. Not Victor, not Claudia, not the cousins who once laughed when I was forced to pack my things and leave without a car in the middle of the night. The same driveway they watched me walk down in disgrace. I walked, back up it in silence, and this time, I didn't knock. The next morning, I returned with the estate manager, Mrs. Langley, a woman who'd worked here since I was 5. She met me at the side door, hands wringing her apron. I always knew. You'd come back, she whispered. I didn't, I replied, handing her a new contract. But I'm here now. In the sunroom, Victor sat alone, robe pressed, face unreadable. He looked older than I remembered, smaller. I suppose this is where you ask us to leave, he said without lifting his eyes. I shook my head. No. Not yet. His brow lifted, just barely. I want a few things moved out of storage, I said. The swing from the backyard, my mother's records, and my name. Put it back on the house title, where it always belonged. He didn't protest. He just nodded slowly. And for the first time in my life, he said something honest. You were always the strongest. We just didn't know how to love that. I didn't answer. There was nothing left to prove, only things to build. The ceasefire didn't last long. 3. Days after the dinner, I received a letter, thick, embossed, wrapped in arrogance. Victor and Claudia were petitioning to contest the deed in probate court, claiming undue influence, mental decline, and fraudulent reinstatement. They were grasping at ghosts. Their attorney was new, flashy, loud. He sent over an aggressive notice demanding a deposition and temporary hold on the estate transfer. I didn't flinch. I'd already retained Alexis Lynn, a quiet storm of a litigator who'd once dismantled a billion-dollar real estate dynasty in court, and did it wearing ballet flats. She read the letter, smiled once, and said, "Let them come." In court, it didn't take long. The audio tapes, the 2 original deeds, Monroe's sworn affidavit. Even Claudia's voice recorded instructing the staff to never let Evelyn back in. The judge's ruling was swift and brutal. The court finds the actions of the respondents to be both fraudulent and malicious in intent. The deed stands. Sole ownership remains with Miss Evelyn Hart. Outside the courtroom, press snapped photos. A reporter shouted, "Ms. Hart, will you be pressing charges?" I paused. No, I'm not here for revenge. But I wasn't there for reconciliation either. Victor didn't look at me as they walked out. Claudia did, and for the first time, she looked afraid, not of exposure, but of irrelevance. I didn't follow them. I had a home to return to, one they no longer belonged in. The offers came in faster than the lawsuits. Developers, luxury hotel chains, historical trusts, all eager to sink their teeth into the Hart estate now that it had made headlines. One proposal came in at $18.7 million with promises of preserving the architectural soul while turning the house into a retreat center for CEOs. I didn't even finish reading it because what they wanted was the house, but what I'd taken back was history. I walked the halls one morning with a cup of black coffee just like my mother used to. She'd play jazz on the old record player and hum along while folding laundry in the sunroom. Her old records were still in storage, dusty but intact. I had them cleaned, cataloged, and restored. The house started humming again, and then did something no one expected. I opened one wing of the estate to serve as a women's refuge, named in my mother's honor, the Marigold Wing. For women cut off, discarded, erased. The plaque out front reads, "To those who were told, to disappear, you deserve doors that open." Victor never visited. Claudia sent one last letter, unsigned, just a check. I donated it to the shelter and mailed the receipt back. Some things can't be bought, and some homes can't be sold. The estate didn't need new marble or rebranding. It needed memory, and I remembered everything. I no longer needed their silence to scream my worth. The newspapers had moved on, the lawsuits had ended, but my story, the real one, was only beginning. I wasn't the same woman who walked out 9 years ago with a suitcase and shame stitched into her spine. That Evelyn had been erased. This one rewrote herself. I started small, restoring the kitchen tiles by hand. They still had flour stains in the grout from the last pie my mother ever baked. The first time I knelt down to clean them, I cried. Not out of grief, but relief, because I was finally allowed to remember her in color. Word spread about the Marigold Wing. Donations came in. Volunteers followed. One of them was Tessa. She brought coffee every Sunday and never asked for credit. "You never said thank you," she joked once. "I didn't have to," I said. "You stayed when it mattered." I hosted my first dinner at the estate the following winter. Not a gala, not a fundraiser. Just a long table, good soup, and people who saw me as Evelyn, not a headline. At the end of the night, someone asked if I ever missed them, the people who cast me out. I looked toward the window, where snow fell just like it did the night. I returned. No, I said. I don't miss ghosts. I smiled, and this time I wasn't pretending. The snow had started again, soft this time, like forgiveness, if you believed in that kind of thing. I stood beneath the old willow tree, in the back garden, the one grandfather planted the day I was born. Its branches still bent toward the earth, like it had been waiting for me all this time. The wind was cold, but I didn't pull my coat tighter. I wanted to feel everything. They buried me in silence. But I returned with truth, not to shame them. Not to impress them, just to remind them, and myself, that erasure only works if you let it stick. I didn't come back to reclaim a house. Came back to become someone no one could steal again. The kind of woman who doesn't need a seat at their table because she's building her own. The kind of woman who knows legacy isn't marble or money. It's what you leave standing after. Everyone else walks away. The camera pulls wide. Evelyn walks alone through the garden. No more shadows, no more whispers, only the sound of boots in snow. And somewhere in the distance, the faint hum of jazz, playing from the open window of the sunroom. You don't have to burn bridges to leave. Some of us just outgrow what was never meant to hold us. They never expected to see me again, but I didn't come for them. I came with the deed,